If you had to guess the nationality of a random given person, how would you do it? But here's the catch! You're not given any description of this person. You get no name, no skin color, no financial status, nothing except a number on the screen. What would be a smart guess? Well, if the goal is to guess correctly, probably the most plausible one. So let's do that. If we look at the statistics of the human population sorted by nationalities, we would see that the most amount of people are in India. So it would be sensible to guess that the person is of Indian nationality. Now let's say you have to make 8 billion guesses, and you have to maximize your correct guesses. Now the problem is, India makes only 17% of that, which means we would be wrong around 83% of the time. So if we want a higher success rate, we have to change tactics. Let's say we get 8 million people to guess instead of us, and to each individual person you assign a country to vote for. What would be the best way to distribute the votings? Well, one of the best ways is to have the percentage of the people voting for a specific country match the percentage of that country's world share of population. That way, the countries that have a lower population share get voted less, and those who have a higher population share get voted more.
Congratulations! You have made a smart guessing system based on statistics.
Now, what would a creative genius do in this situation? Well, they would probably go with their gut.
What? Their gut? But that's stupid!
And yes, from this perspective, it's incredibly irrational. If they're tackling a problem that requires pure deductive logic, they are in fact irrational. But what if I told you that this way of approaching the problem, like following their gut, is exactly what makes creative people come up with ideas that nobody thinks of? Let me explain. The problem that we just now had was a problem based on deductive logic. In mathematics, if we say that a plus b times 2 is c, it's sensible to assume that a plus b equals half c. Even though we weren't given that information, that assumption is mathematically correct. It literally can't be wrong. 2 plus 2 is always 4 in mathematics, no matter how hard you try to make it 5. Many mess up here by occasionally applying the same thinking that helps them come up with great ideas in the world to math. That's how we got the idea that 2 plus 2 might equal 5. But here's the fallacy. Math doesn't work like that. Math is either correct or it isn't. There is no in between. So how does our world, that's not so black and white, come here into play? The world where data is consistently changing and adding up, where sometimes the factors that matter the most are invisible or unpredictable. When something is extremely flexible, adaptable, and prone to change, we say that it's malleable. And that's what our world is.
Malleable.
Every day we have new discoveries, new content, new wars, new debates, new problems, new achievements, new goals, new information that influences our decision making on daily basis. But why does that influence us? Well, because we as humans are malleable. Literally, the ability to adapt and grow as a species is what helped us survive. Now, why is that important? Well, that's what leads us to one of the coolest features of human race: creativity. We can ask what creativity is, and I tried to cover this topic in the other video, but the more research I did on this, the blurrier the answer got. Creativity is like intelligence. Everybody is certain they know what it is, except the people who are studying the topic. And believe it or not, creativity and intelligence have very interesting crossovers, which I'll cover more deeply in another video that explores the mad genius stereotype, to see if and why there is any correlation between creative genius and what we call insanity. But one is certain, creativity is what helps us come up with crazy, never before thought of ideas that leave a big impact on our world. That is in research called
Big C creativity.
But it seems that some people come up with such ideas more often than others. And there's a reason why, which I will cover here. First, let's understand the ideation process. So to come up with an idea, we need to do the impossible.
Think!
Even though it doesn't always seem like it. Yes, we have to use our brains for ideas. One study by Beatty and colleagues in 2014 noticed that during the ideation process there are 3 most active networks in our brain. Default mode network, that we use for generating and gathering new materials by daydreaming, exploring, and processing information. Then we have salience network, which detects which ideas and moments are worth attending to, and switches control between default mode network and our next, executive control network, which we use for evaluating, filtering, and refining those ideas into a coherent, goal-directed output. Now remember, neurology is very complex and this is very simplified. It's really messy. This study is debated and some studies report different brainwave activation during ideation than others. We're also also not sure how much merit dopamine receptors have during the process. But the significance that this study brings is the suggestion that our brain firstly goes into a mode that gathers things and then evaluates what's important and then tries to turn it into a usable outcome. Also, factors like personality, attention, memory, and some even say intelligence attribute to one's creative ability. Things like leaky and flexible attention, openness to experience, flexibility, type of intelligence, and many more all affect one's creative ability. But let's squish those down into three main factors: mindset, environment, and post-processing. Mindset being one of the really important factors. Our mindset is our approach and relationship with our work, and it's highly affected by motivation. Ultimately, we can cut our motivation into two parts: intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is when the reason we're engaged in the task comes from internal factors. Let's just say you create because of love of the game, or because of the flow state. Some kind of expression, personal meaning, sentiment, and such would be considered as intrinsic motivation. But when you create to generate profit, gain followers, become famous, gain or keep status, get power, or to create external change, that's extrinsic motivation. Motivation is important because it's been documented that when there's a primary focus on extrinsic motivation while one's doing creative work, their creative ability drops down. But how does that look like in the real world? Imagine that you're a musician and you're going on the stage to perform. You go on the stage and everything is going well. You're enjoying the music and the act of playing it. Suddenly, you know there's a part coming up that you regularly mess up when practicing. Your whole attention shifts from playing the music to how will this crowd perceive me if I mess this up. Not exactly in those words, but the focus shifts from playing the music to status preservation. The self-esteem drops, and so does the quality of your performance. This is also common when musicians play something cool a dozen times without fail, and then they try to record it, and suddenly they mess up immediately, because the focus shifts from playing to making a good recording. Now we can take this quote by Thelonious Monk. I say play your own way. Don't play what the public wants. You play what you want and let the public pick up on what you're doing, even if it takes them 15 to 20 years. We can call that mindset. But if you look closer, you can notice that this sentence is of intrinsic nature. It tells you to focus on the inner rather than the outer. That's in short, mindset. Beside that, we have environment. Even when your mindset is perfect, we are always conditioned by our environment. How people around you view and value creativity, how weird ideas are treated, how other people are treated, how the work is being treated, what's the relationship between co-creators, how rigid is the process, is it formulaic, are people taught to be open to new things, is there room for healthy critical feedback? Studies show that all of these factors highly impact on one's performance. If there are tight deadlines or competitive environment, people's creativity will drop. Also, one of the biggest factors that stop people from suggesting ideas is the possibility of ridicule. So even if somebody is personally intrinsically motivated, the environment can force one to focus externally because of the policies and the culture around them. But even if you get everything perfect, there's still a big chance you won't get any great ideas. Sometimes the perfect thing is to leave everything alone for some time, and then magically come up with the greatest idea ever. This is also called incubation. When we study, practice, or think about something, after we're done with whatever we are doing, all of that data gets stored into our subconscious and becomes a background process. This means that your mind is subconsciously tackling a problem while you're not even thinking about it. And then suddenly, boom, idea. After we come up with an idea, there's still a possibility of it dying and coming to life. What determines what happens to it? Well, at the start, how ideas are evaluated, treated, like deadlines, jokingly, too seriously, rigidly, risky or safe, will ultimately determine if we try to turn that idea into reality. But also, you have to keep in mind, very often ideas come out unfinished, and it's very important to stay open to adjusting the idea, experimenting with it, and seeing what works and what doesn't. Like Mark Zuckerberg said, one single eureka moment isn't a thing, but more of a process where idea grows and comes to life. Now you have a rough idea how ideation works. But what can you do to start coming up with unique ideas? Coming up with creative ideas is a skill that to some comes more naturally than to others. But countless studies prove that this is a skill that can be trained. The first and primal thing that you have to adjust is how you think when approaching ideas. So here are 3 main concepts you want to focus on. First is lateral thinking. This is a concept by Edward de Bono, where the goal is changing perspectives for the sake of changing them, to explore unlogical and unconventional angles. Second is exploration. Openness to failure. Expose yourself to the things you have never seen, or something that you'd never do. Do some random stuff. Intake random input. Do something that you don't know how it will turn out. Third, repetition. Repetition legitimizes. Fail often, not to gather data for improvement, but to become familiar with failure, so it doesn't block you in exploration. Now there are countless games to train your ideation process on, and in around a week from now, I'll post a link to my Notion page with ones that I gathered, which you can try out and read about for free. I just need time to make it look nice. When you do them, you'll quickly learn that they feel like child's play. And that's the goal, not to create something amazing, but to become familiar with interacting with weird ideas and concepts that can even end up being some kind of inspiration for a project of yours. Do these often, and slowly but surely you'll see that your ideas will become a bit wackier and more interesting, and some may end up being one of your favorite ones. This video has been quite long, and if you liked it, make sure to subscribe and comment what you'd like to see next, or share something that helped you with your creative journey. Besides that, keep being original and stay creative. See you in the next video.